us tonight is Mr. Bill Randles, Republican candidate for governor of the great state of Missouri. He is going to lead us in a prayer tonight. Mr. Randles.
All bow with me, please. Lord God, we thank you this evening. We thank you for this chance to be together. We thank you for the freedom to express our views, to work hard for what we believe in. We thank you for the blessings that you've given us being part of this country. We pray you give us wisdom in how we proceed to protect those freedoms and blessings for the generations to come. Lord, I pray you bless these proceedings. You will give us the words to say, the ideas that we express would be pleasing in your sight, and we would all have the wisdom and understanding we need to advance your cause, your honor. We praise things in Jesus' name. Amen.
And next, we'd like to Tim McNabb come and lead us in our Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Randall. We'd also like to thank Mark and Pat Andrews for letting us use Pillar of the Valley tonight. Also, thanks to all the volunteers who brought food and other things, and to all of our panel members and our moderator. And now I'd like to introduce Senator Brian Nieves, who is our moderator for this evening. Here's the best part. Somebody said, Senator, why don't you take a couple of minutes and tell the audience about you and your work, and then talk about our subject this evening. A couple minutes.
Very good. Well, they all asked me to become a senator where you're supposed to talk for a long time, and then they want me to not talk for a long time. Let me just say that, when we pulled in here tonight, really, few things warm the heart like pulling in to Pillar in the Valley and seeing the parking lot all the way full. That's a very good. Thank you for being the kind of people that would be concerned with these kinds of matters. And contrary to what it says here, I'm not going to take some time to talk about myself. I will mention one thing. I almost said no to this offer to be the moderator because it's a little bit too close to the word moderate. I didn't want to be confused as a moderate around this crowd, and I wouldn't want to ever be confused as a moderate at all. Tonight, we're going to learn about a subject that, it wasn't that long ago that if people started talking about nullification, people thought you were crazy. And then all of a sudden, people started really beginning to understand the basics and the philosophy of nullification and how to use the tool of nullification between states and the federal government. And as you can see from the crowd that's here tonight, this is obviously a subject of great concern to a lot of people. And so I'm very excited about what we're going to learn tonight. I happen to know most of these men very, very well. I've had a chance to meet Bill at the Capitol and get to know him a little bit. The rest of these folks are from right around here, and so we know them fairly well. And I'm very excited to hear what these men have to say on the subject of nullification. Now, as you can see, we have 4 people on the panel. And who they are in order, just the way that they're sitting here. Of course, we have Ed Martins, who is a candidate for Congress. We have Bill Randles, candidate for governor. And this is a very, very unusual thing, actually, to be able to say about any of these men. But really, Jim, I don't know that I've ever introduced Jim Lemke where I've said, and to the left of. You're witnessing something very rare here tonight. And to the left of Bill Randles is State Senator Jim Lemke. sticking with that theme to the left of Senator Lemke is State Representative Paul Curtman. And I will mention that they are all to my left. All right, now what's going to happen is we're going to have each member is going to speak on the subject of a little bit about themselves and nullification for 5 minutes. And then we're going to ask the audience to participate and ask questions. We're going to let Ed Martin go first because he actually has to leave at 7:30. So if you do have some questions for Ed, you might want to try to do those early. So Ed, take it away.
Thank you, Brian. It's great to be with so many of you. Many of you have already been talking about these issues and certainly talking about sovereignty. I think it's very, very important. I want to thank the organizers for doing this. I want to talk about this in 3 ways. I'm going to tell a story, then talk a little bit about the history of what's going on in our country, and then talk about what I think is the most pressing issue that we face as a nation and as a state and really as a people. So first, I'll try to tell this story. I've been casting about how to describe what I think is the sort of fundamental problem, the misunderstanding of federal power. And I've come up with, as many of you know, I usually do this using my family and some story about my children. The kids are here. My wife, Carol, who I was about to introduce and say thank you to her, is now out with one of our kids. She's at the doorway back there. But my wife, Carol's here, and we're grateful. We have 3 great children with us and 1 children in Carol's belly that'll be here on February 7th, if not sooner, so we're very blessed. So here's what I think about the story. You know, our kids went trick-or-treating. I know many of you have children or grandchildren, they go trick-or-treating. When they got back, and this is a story, by the way, it didn't quite go down like this. They mostly came back and were so hopped up on sugar they really didn't go to sleep. But let's say they got home that night with all this candy from trick-or-treating. And Carol and I said, as the parents, we said to our 3 kids, the 3 of you are equal, and you can decide what to do with the candy. We're giving you that opportunity. And the 3 of them went about, deciding what they're going to do with the candy. And over time, they came back, and the 3 of them said, first Madeline, the oldest, said, we're going to take more candy, Mom and Dad. There's more left. We want more. Mom, Carol and I looked at each other and said, how'd that happen? And Edward said, what we decided was we're going to take all of the candy you have, or various parts of it. And then Mikey, who's probably not capable of doing this, would have said, yes, I agree with both. I've decided that is totally within the rules. Well, that's a little bit of a silly example of what we have going on right now in America. Our constitutional system, and I see Dave Rowland here, he can tell you better than I can, our system was set up where the 3 branches of government, federal government, have been given some power by us, by we the people. Very different than what happened when you have divine right of kings in Europe and throughout history. We gave them some of our rights. We gave it through the states. We gave it to 3 branches. I think this is very important for people right now. They don't understand this fact. The legislative branch has said, we want more and more power. The executive branch has said, we want more and more power. And then the judiciary has said, like Mikey, we think that is by the rules. But see, they're not the ultimate judge of what is the rules. We are the people that have the power. And the Constitution is what frames out how we're supposed to live together. I think it's a fundamental question for someone like Dave Rowland, who is litigating cases about freedom in the state courts. We all live in fear of a federal judge. A federal judge will say this or that, and therefore the situation is over. We're waiting for the Supreme Court to say what they think Obamacare means, whether it's a violation of our rights. And we all know it is. And the question we have to answer for ourselves is, are the federal courts the last judge, are they the last people to speak on power and sovereignty in our country? And the answer is no. We the people. We the people. It's a fundamental problem. Right now, I'll go into the second part of this. I'll just talk a little bit about a couple pieces of history in America that's got us to this point today that is a problem. One is the Commerce Clause. I don't know if many of you are well versed in the Commerce Clause. Dave is, and others are. And the Commerce Clause has been used to expand the power of the federal government beyond anything we could ever recognize. I won't go into the details now, but suffice to say, the federal judiciary has agreed with Congress and agreed with the executive to say we want more and more power. Well, that's just wrong. That's just wrong. If you go down through history, you look at the other parts of American history, you're now seeing in the Supreme Court, we're seeing pushback, and we're seeing pushback in the legislature. I want to mention Cole McNary. Cole, are you here still? Cole McNary is in the back. Cole McNary is actually running for state treasurer, he's a state rep from out here, but in Gretchen and Lisa and some others, in happy memory of, there's Cole McNary. Gretchen and Lisa, we were talking, Cole and I was a school teacher before he became a dishonest man, a politician. And he and I were talking about education. Education's another place where the federal government and the federal judges tell us what we're allowed to do. It's not in the Constitution. It's not in the Constitution. So over time we've seen an encroachment of our sovereign will, of our sovereignty, that should disturb all of us.
Yeah.
So the final point I'd like, and we'll go into this tonight, it's about Obamacare. Obamacare is the best opportunity we have to stop the worst legislation that I've ever seen. Obamacare is a unique opportunity. What I'd say, we'll have questions and answers. What I'd say is you need a couple of different things to make this happen. For us to nullify or to stop Obamacare. One, you need the will of the people to rise up like we did in Missouri, 71%, but we need it again and again and again. We need us to say it's not okay. Jim Lemke will tell us about how Jay Nixon is saying it's okay. Then we need legislators in our state legislature who will say it's not okay. We're starting to have them. Then we need a governor who will say it's not okay. We need all these pieces. But we also need federal elected officials, whether senators, who are supposed to be responsive to the legislature, as you know, or representatives, who will stand in the way, interpose on the invasion of our sovereignty on behalf of the people. So we're going to have a chance to talk more tonight, but I want to say thank you again to the organizers. It's a great crowd. This is a hugely important issue, and we need to fight this fight every day to make sure we stop Obamacare, but also so that we get back what's our sovereignty, what's ours. It's not theirs. It's ours. So thanks again.
Thank you, Ed. Always inspiring to hear from Ed. Next, we're going to hear from Bill Randles, candidate for governor in the state of Missouri. Bill, take it away.
Well, I want to thank all of y'all for coming out. I want to thank you for having Devin on here. You know, it really does warm your heart to come out on a cold night like this and see this many citizens interested in their government and willing to put themselves out to make a difference. I want to get right to substance, and I want to mention three things to you in the 5 minutes I have. I want to take a moment to frame the problem for you. I want to talk about what I think a winning solution is in the short term. And then I want to talk to you about a long-term victory, because I'm not the kind of person who likes to be on the defense. I'm not the kind of person who likes to just react. Now, in terms of the problem, you know, if I had a slogan for this campaign, and I could use my favorite one, and the hippies hadn't ruined it in the 60s, my slogan would be power to the people. Because that's all that animates my campaign. How do we return more power to the people that's been taken by the state government and the federal government? Well, to do that, you have to have a plan, but you also have to understand the problem. All of us are upset about Obamacare, and it's a terrible intrusion. But the biggest danger to Obamacare isn't the statute, it's the regulations that are going to come out of the statute. You know, Ed was right about the three branches of government, but I think there's another element here as to what's going wrong with the balance of power, and that's the regulatory system. Let me give you a statistic to amaze and depress your friends with. Every day that the Obama administration's been in office, they have passed 10 new regulations. 365 days a year. You're less free in 10 ways today than you were yesterday, and you will be less free in 10 ways tomorrow. Now, to put that in perspective, Congress probably will not pass 10 bills this month. But there were 10 new rules today, and there'll be 10 more tomorrow. And coming out of Obamacare, out of the thousands of pages, is one directive after another for more rules. If the Obamacare bill is this big, the rules that will come out of it will be this big. One of the things that happened with the balance of power is the three branches gave up a bunch of power, starting in the 30s primarily, and they let it bleed down to regulatory officials who are responsible to no one. You want to be powerful in Washington, Ed? Don't run for Congress. Don't run for Senate. Be a regulator. That's what real power is. Because let me tell you something. Let's say the head of the EPA passes a rule that Ed hates.
Now, they can call him in for a hearing. They may give him a hard time, and they'll sit there impatiently looking at him because they're going to be thinking, you know what, Congressman? I passed my rule, and overturn my rule. You've got to have a majority of the House vote to overturn it. You've got to have a majority of the Senate vote to overturn it in the same language. And you have to have a president sign it. Or you have to have enough votes to override it. So where's the real power in Washington? It's in the hands of people we don't vote for, and that we can't take out of office. I'm going to return to that idea in a minute about the solution phase. Because we have to address that. That's the biggest intrusion. The court cases are frustrating, the executive orders are frustrating, and the statutes are frustrating. But the regulations are a roaring river compared to a stream in comparison. So what do we do? Well, those of you who are on my email list will have received an article from me a while back called State Sovereignty, a Winning Strategy. Those of you who aren't, if you sign up, we'll be happy to send it to you. We can talk about it more in the question period. But I think it's not enough to say we want to nullify, we want to oppose federal power. You have to have an actual plan to make it work. And in my article, I differentiate between funded and unfunded mandates because we have to approach them differently. But just to give you a teaser, let me say this. Conservatives have not yet come up with a very good nullification strategy. You know who has? Liberals. There are two forms of nullification working today, working brilliantly. Medical marijuana in California, that's nullification. And the sanctuary movement for illegal immigrants. I oppose both ends. But we as conservatives need to read that playbook. That has worked. And we can implement the same tactics here in Missouri. I'll be happy to talk more about the question and answer. And now I want to take one look longer term. Because I don't like being on the defense. And the word nullification means you're on the defense. You're nullifying something someone else did. How do we get out of the pattern of needing to nullify and return to actual constitutional limited government? One part, as you may gather, is we have to get a hold of the regulations. And one thing I will do in Missouri when I'm elected governor is, between my election and the inauguration, we will go through the entire regulatory law of the state of Missouri. Every regulation that's too hostile to business, out of date, too intrusive, we will strike. We will hand it to the legislature and we will say, pass this as the regulatory law of the state of Missouri. And then do something no state's done since the New Deal. Take away the power of the regulators to make any new rules. In one step, we'll return to constitutional government. In one step, the check and balances will begin to work again in Missouri. Because anyone that can pass a rule that will bind you will be someone you can vote for and hold accountable. Be happy to talk about more of this as we go. My friends, we can fix these problems, but we can't do it piecemeal. We have to do it boldly. Thank you.
Now, the remaining two folks that are going to speak with you are sitting members of the legislature. And so somebody in the back audience whose name, I won't mention his name, but his initials are Eric Rasher, handed me these plates that I'm going to use for the remainder of our speakers. You see there's a 3 and then a 2 and a 1. And so I know it's always dangerous when there's a senator, getting ready to speak. I know, but we're still going to try. And so anyway, the next person that's going to speak, I'll tell you, I've described this man in a lot of ways. But I think the best thing that I can say about my friend, Jim Lemke, is that he is my friend. And one of the reasons that he is my friend is because I respect him. And I respect him based on what I've seen from him and what I've experienced with him. And so next we're going to have my friend, Senator Jim Lemke.
I'm really excited to see a full room here tonight. I mean, the idea that on a cold Tuesday evening that we've got patriots that are here that are concerned about their state and their nation and their liberty, means a lot. It means a lot to us that have been in the trenches, for the last number of years. I want to mention another thing before I get onto the topic. Do we know how blessed we are that we have men like these two on the ballot, wanting to serve us in working? this guy I've known for a long time. This guy I haven't known that long, but every time it seems like I'm at an event with him, I have to speak after him, and that's not a good thing. It is amazing the grasp that Bill has on these issues. I can't tell you. Now, I've been and I've served with a lot of politicians, okay, in the last 10 years, okay? And whether it be the guy that occupies the governor's mansion right now, or any other candidates that I've seen for the office, none of them can hold a candle to this guy. Now, his problem is, that, you know, in this business, you know, your campaign has got to catch fire. It's got to catch fire, because Bill is not going to have the ability to raise the kind of money that he needs to raise to get his name out and to really make this thing work, you know, unless it catches fire. I mean, that can happen, okay? But you all have to be a part of it. If you believe in Bill Randles, then you've got to get off your backside and come out on a Tuesday night to an event like this. But no, you really have to get cracking, because we need guys like Bill Randles in state government. So I appreciate him being here. I don't have anything positive to say about the guy either. Oh, does it? Oh, crime. Well, it's not going to take me very long, because I usually do best, you know, question Q&A. I want you to consider two things as we consider this doctrine of nullification. I want you to consider how the Declaration of Independence and our Constitution cannot be separated. Okay? They cannot be separated. Our Declaration is about natural law and where our rights come from. Okay? All right? And it's also about self-government. All right? And then, as that connects to our Constitution, it's about our representation, okay, what their responsibility is on our behalf, right? As Ed said, we delegate power. We don't delegate rights to these entities, this dual sovereignty, this compound republic. I want you to remember those terms, okay? We, the people, delegate power to these entities to protect our rights, okay? So we've got within both of those republics, those compound republics, the separation of power, right? And that's all connected. And then we've got the concept of limited government, all right? This doctrine of nullification was so important at the beginning of our nation, because this was not an easy process for our founders to work through. Remember, you know, they fought the Declaration of Independence. They fought a war for independence, right? Then they came together under the Articles of Confederation, all right? And they didn't work, all right? We were governed under those for 9 years, and they didn't work. We were splintering. We were falling apart, okay? So they came back together, and the process of ratifying our Constitution was a very, very difficult process, and it almost didn't happen. All right? By God's good providence, it did happen. Okay? But early on, we had all kinds of founders that had real questions about the amount of power that we were giving to this central government through this Constitution. They were very worried about it. And just shortly after, maybe 10 years after the Constitution was ratified, the first time that the doctrine of nullification was exercised was after Congress passed the Alien and Sedition Act. All right? You know what the Alien and Sedition Act did? 10 years after the ratification of the Constitution, it said that an American couldn't speak out against its government. How is that possible, folks? And in hindsight, those founders that had a concern about what Congress might do, that was warranted, wasn't it? Because this Congress that we had delegated power to and were afraid of, and believe me, our founders were afraid of government, in a very short period of time, they forgot. Right? Or maybe they purposefully did it. Because, once you get into these offices, you're awful jealous of them and you don't want to give them up. Am I getting close? Here's the deal. So Jefferson and Madison write the Kentucky and Virginia resolutions on behalf of their states, saying to the federal Congress, you can't do that. Now, what we're going to discuss here tonight is there is a lot of controversy over this doctrine of nullification. I mean, Madison, at a time in his political career, believed it was a power that the states had, and then other writings that you see from him, he says, well, maybe they didn't. Okay, but I want you to think, and this is the other thing I want you to consider tonight, how important post-17th Amendment, the 17th Amendment to our Constitution, which was ratified in 1913, how important this doctrine, this tool of nullification is now. Because our system is all built on checks and balances and separations of power. All right? And the biggest check that our founders built into the Constitution on behalf of state sovereignty and the sovereignty of the people was the idea that state legislatures put their U.S. senators in place.
That's right.
Not to represent you, the people, to represent the states. All right? And they were, and that was, the chain that the people had through the states on the federal government, and we gave that away in 1913. And from there on, the republic was in jeopardy, and we've been going downhill since then. All right? So those are the things we have to talk about. And in the light of post-17th Amendment, this doctrine of nullification is key for us, the states, to stand in the gap on behalf of you, the people. All right? Thank you.
It seems like government has an insatiable desire for more of our money and our liberty, and we're hearing a lot about that tonight. Jim, I was just reminded as Jim was speaking that when we had our filibuster, Jim and I participated in the filibuster together this last session, and there was actually 4 of us that were going to do it. And since I had been in the military, I actually made us a duty roster. And so that duty roster had each one of us holding the floor for 2 hours each. Well, the other 3 of us, by the time our 2 hours were over, we felt like we were exhausted. And when we went to get Jim at the end of his 2-hour shift, he said, no, I can go another 2 more, don't worry. Give somebody else a break. All right. Now, we're going to get on to our last panel member, and I just got to tell you, I've had the pleasure of watching this young man for the last, couple of years. And I remember the very first time that I heard him speak, I made a beeline to him, and I said, will you please run for office? And I'd like to think that it was because I talked him into it. That was all it took. But anyway, you all know Paul, and so Representative Paul Curtman, come on.
I'm just gonna, you hear me? Yeah. I'm just gonna start out reading some quotes. This one's from Thomas Jefferson. On every question of construction of the Constitution, carry ourselves back in time when the Constitution was adopted. Recollect the spirit manifested in the debates, and instead of trying what meaning may be squeezed out of the text or invented against it, conform to the probable one in which it was passed. From the author of the Declaration of Independence. In other words, what he's saying is, it just might not be a living, breathing Constitution. Maybe, just maybe, what you should do is you ought to go back and read the minutes that James Madison kept at the Constitutional Convention. He later on said, our peculiar security is in possession of a written Constitution. Let us not make it a blank paper by construction. In other words, what he's saying there is, let's not so broadly interpret the Constitution that it might as well just be a blank piece of paper, not have any value to anybody. When he was drafting the Kentucky resolutions, Thomas Jefferson said, "Whensoever the general government assumes undelegated powers, its acts are unauthoritative, void, and of no force." He said the same thing again when he was helping draft some other states' resolutions also. He said, "I believe the states can best govern our home concerns, and the general government our foreign ones." He said, "When all power is drawn to Washington, it will defeat the purposes for which we separated from England in the first place." James Madison, who a lot of people call the father of the Constitution, he's the one that kept the minutes during the constitutional debate. He said, "There are more instances of the abridgment of the freedom of the people by gradual and silent encroachments of those in power than by violent and sudden usurpations." And so that's kind of what I want to talk about for just the next couple minutes. Thought I set my timer here. Okay, I'll start it now. 5 minutes. Just kidding. But I just want to make a point that I heard Ed Martin say. We're at this event out in Kansas City, Nullify Now, and the whole idea behind the talk that he gave was that it's not enough to vote, you have to win the argument. And so just I want to use what I learned from him that day and say, with all the policies, one of the things that I learned in Jefferson City is that, let me go back to a Jefferson quote real quick. He said, y'all heard the quote about the chains of the Constitution? "Have no confidence in man, but bind him down from his mischief with the chains of the Constitution." Contrast that with what FDR said. He said there is no document that's more marvelously elastic than the Constitution. But see, people today think that isn't an elastic document. You have the Democrats on the left, and their interpretation stretches it way over to the left, and then instead of sticking to the Constitution as a chain, or even to the party platform, unfortunately in most cases, the Republicans will grab it, and they'll counter those leftist policies by grabbing the Constitution and stretching it way over to the right. And what it does every single time is it grows freedom, it robs you of your property, your tax dollars, and your liberty. And so what we're doing is we're taking a right policy to combat a leftist policy, and nobody's even giving any credit to the Constitution anymore. I was in a committee during the special session, and a Republican actually said this. Somebody came forward to testify against the bill, and somebody said, "I'm not so sure it's the role of the legislature to consider the constitutionality of this bill." I read the Constitution on the House floor in a debate. And I heard a whole bunch of commotion in the back, and somebody actually raised a point of order and tried to convince the speaker that I was out of order for reading from the Constitution. Now, you kind of want to smile and say, "Those idiots." No, those are the people that are getting elected, setting policy, that are taxing you and growing government and taking away your freedom and your liberty. So it's not enough just to go and vote. You have to make sure that you're educating everybody else that's also voting about the principles of freedom and liberty. And people will respond to it because that is an extremely attractive message. Because people throughout the history of the world have died fighting for their freedom and fighting for their liberty. And you can't tell me, a guy who won in a district that is only 56% Democrat, you can't tell me that people don't respond to the message of liberty, because I went up to a guy and gave him my message when I was campaigning, and he told me that he's upset with President Obama because he's not far enough to the left. But he's going to vote for me because he likes what I had to say. I attribute that to the fact that this thing that we call the overwhelming sense of truth that God gives us all when He created us all equal and endowed us all with certain inalienable rights, it's an attractive message, and people want their freedom and they want their liberty protected. And if we can get that argument and win that argument with the people, nullification is not going to be a problem at all. Because it's going to come like that. Because people are going to be able to read the Constitution and recognize what they need to do in order to keep themselves free. It's a simple thing to do, I think. And it's an attractive message. Thank you.
I think he hit the nail right on the head when he talked about how it is that an extremely conservative Republican can win, what did you say, a 56% Democrat district, is because truth is sweet to the ear. And he went and told the people the truth about liberty and freedom, and it was sweet to the ear. And that Democrat district, the 56% Democrat district, elected not only a Republican, but a very, very conservative Republican, which makes it even more unbelievable. So, great. Thank you, gentlemen, each one of you, for giving us your 8.5-minute speeches. We appreciate that. Good thing I gave up my time, so you all could do that. I kind of had a feeling that was the way it was going to go. Now, if you remember, our good friend Ed Martin is going to have to leave us just a little bit early tonight. We are going to open up for questions. We've got a lovely young lady that's going to be bringing around a microphone. Do we have another microphone for you? And if we don't have another microphone, then you're just going to have to ask your questions very loud. But the plan is to have a microphone. So she's got young legs that can run around real fast, and she's going to try to get that microphone around to you. So we do want to open it up for questions. If you would, just kind of raise your hand or stand, and we'll get a mic over to you, and you go in here in front. Actually, you know what? I'll just let him use mine.
Hi, this question was for Ed. The healthcare compact bill that amazingly was passed in the Missouri House and Senate, and the governor let it lay long enough for it to become law, is now Missouri state law. And I look at Obamacare as a 12-headed hydra that we need to attack from every possible point. And while the healthcare compact would probably not be at the top of my list, there's a number of other states that have also, that's become state law. The next step in that process is the states getting together and creating that compact, where they're saying this is what we choose to do for our health care. The next step is it has to be passed through the United States House, which I think should be an easy sell, and then be passed through the Senate. It does not have to be signed by the President. If those hurdles are passed, that supersedes federal law. And my question is, are you familiar with what the states are doing, Missouri being one of them, that have passed the health care compact to bring that to fruition? And my thinking is also, if that process goes through and it then goes to the Senate, it's going to be at an election time, and people like Claire McCaskill will have to choose between voting in favor of their state controlling its own health care or voting against her own state controlling their own health care. And I think that would put a tremendous amount of pressure on the quote-unquote blue dog Democrats in the Senate.
Well, I'm not an expert on the health care compact, but I will tell you that this is a fight, I think someone said earlier, this is a fight that we've got to take on at every level. But let me point out a couple things. I mean, Jim, I hope you're going to talk in a minute about the fact that Missouri, not only did we pass the health care compact law, not only did we have the proposition that 71% of the people voted for that said, please don't do this. By the way, I don't think Senator Jane Cunningham is here, but no gathering that talks about these issues will be complete without mentioning her name and thanking her for doing that. But not only have we done all that, we've also had vocal opposition publicly from the legislature on these issues. I think there's been some confusion on the health care, the exchange. I think Jim will talk about it. We've had all of that. And yet we have two problems in Missouri. One problem is that the Attorney General, who's supposed to litigate these cases, is Attorney General Chris Koster, is hiding under his desk or traveling around trying to find, the puppy mills or whatever he's doing. He's not taking on this issue. And I think what we have to have, and I know Bill's an attorney, I'm an attorney, Dave Rowland, I keep mentioning his name, we have to have fearless lawyers in office that will take this on. So the first thing I'd say is that our Attorney General, he finally filed a brief that actually said, I think Obamacare might be unconstitutional, but I really like the policy, and I'm not sure, and I'm going back under my desk as quick as I can, and just don't tell the Democrats or the Republicans. Mitch, I don't know, it's a summary, Mitch Hubbard may know better, but so as to the health care compact, here's what I would say. I think that health care compact, my read of other states, is it's unlikely to be successful in enough states. I think it's convoluted in some ways, people don't quite understand it, and I don't think that that's going to be the most successful way. I happen to think that a state, whether it's Missouri or another state, will actually nullify Obamacare. And I think that will set up a showdown. Everybody here should thank Scott Walker for showing the country that you can stand up love to the unions and to what's gone on, but I have to be candid with you. Scott Walker's, what he did was a question of state law. He said our state's laws are bad. What he doesn't know is that if Obama wins again and they get their way, the NLRB, the National Labor Relations Board, will do to the whole country what they did in Wisconsin over 25 years. So that was a fight over state law. The next fight is going to be a governor with a guy like Lemke and Nieves and a gal like Cunningham and Curtman and others who are going to say, hey, wait, as to the structure of our country, you're not allowed to do this. And that's going to set up a fight, a question of the sovereignty of we the people that I think is the future, because it's not just Obamacare. We got to win that argument. Then we got to move on to things like EPA and FERC, and everybody else knows that there's a bunch of them. So I'm not as high on the compact, I'll be candid with you.
Thank you. And I've just made a decision, a moderator's decision. I can see that it's going to be difficult to get this mic back and forth from the audience to our speakers, and we've got a big room with an interesting arrangement. It's going to make it difficult for that young lady to get to everybody. So if you see where our next question asker, Cynthia Davis, is right there, if whoever wants to be the next question asker, if you'll make your way to that little hole, there's kind of a hole, kind of a break in the action right there where she's standing. If you'll go to that area, that will be the area from which we will take questions. So, next question right there.
Thank you. My question is directed at Bill Randles, and I really value having the thoughtful and deep discussion tonight. One thing I particularly enjoyed, you know, when I was in the Missouri House for 8 years, I did all I could legislatively to correct the problem. And in fact, I was the one who filed the original Healthcare Freedom Act in Missouri that did pass out of the House. And why I did it is because at the time, that was all we could do. But what I appreciated about your very intellectual comments is I've never actually heard it framed in such a manner that a state can stop the regulation. And that's a whole new idea that makes so much sense, and I am, you know, that I'm intending to be your lieutenant governor. And so while we're there together, Bill, tell me more about how a state can say we will not respect any federal law with the bureaucrats regulating. Explain that a little deeper.
Okay, there are several layers. The first thing to understand about federal law is there are two ways that the federal government controls the states. One is unfunded mandates, where they just say, do what I say because I say so. The second are funded or partially funded mandates, where they give you a check with strings attached. Education, environmental laws, etc. Obamacare is essentially an unfunded mandate. I mean, they've said that we may get a little because of exchanges and stuff, but there's no money appropriate, so it's an unfunded mandate. As a threshold matter, as governor of Missouri, I would take the position that all federal unfunded mandates are unconstitutional, and I would resist them. Anytime the federal government steps outside of its traditional areas, it's engaging in unconstitutional activity. Furthermore, now, you can't take the second position I'm going to articulate. The courts rejected in the 30s, but that does not mean we can't revisit it. I believe that the regulatory scheme we have in Washington, and to some extent in Jeff City, is unconstitutional. It's a delegation of the power to make laws to people that aren't voted on by the people. That's not a Republican form of government. It's something else. And so I would take the position that all regulations that come out of DHHS with respect to Obamacare are unconstitutional intrusions, and we would test them, and we would delay. Now, all of these, of course, are based on the assumption that Obama wins re-election and we're stuck with it. Obviously, if it's fixed by Republicans, we will have had a good discussion tonight and talked about a wide range of issues. But assuming the worst-case scenario, this is why I turned your attention to medical marijuana and sanctuary cities. Because, again, I don't agree with the goals, but those are very effective nullification techniques because they're delaying. They are, when really pressed, pretending to comply but not complying. They're going around the regulations with a different scheme. And so it is, in effect,
an example of the states behaving like teenagers who the federal government walks by and says, clean your room, and they say, okay, and they don't. And they walk by and say, clean your room, and you don't. And so it's a more sophisticated legal strategy than that, but essentially that's what we would do, and we would wait Barack Obama out.
Can I do a quick follow-up? Would they eliminate the EPA as well, because they're doing more regulations than any other branch? Are you talking about all the federal management and all the, if you want to start with creating a list of the bureaucratic decisions that are hurting our lives, where do you cut it off with what the state is obligated to comply with?
Your question's a good one. The EPA is one of those partially funded mandates. The EPA has vast power, but almost no enforcement personnel. So what they do is they pay the states to enforce the federal laws. And they give us a pittance, a few $1 million, and in exchange, our DNR folks become EPA's cops. One of the first things I will ask the legislature to do as governor is say no to this federal money. We will say to the EPA, enforce your own rules. But that's how you have to draw the distinction between funded and unfunded. We can do the same thing in education. Keep your own money and we'll pass our own rules. But we've got to start that plan, and we've got to do it very conscientiously and very publicly.
Thank you again to the organizers. I have to get to another event, and I wish you all a Merry and Holy Christmas. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I'm glad that Bill mentioned the idea of, and we worked on this in the Senate just last session when the federal government was trying to send us, more of the stimulus money. Okay, myself and Senator Nieves and a couple of our colleagues stood up for weeks every time these bills came in front of us and filibustered us. All right, said send the money back. We don't want it. They don't have it. Okay, they're borrowing it from China. Okay, they're borrowing it from our children and grandchildren. Okay, they sent us an extension, the fourth extension of unemployment benefits. Now, I realize that we all know somebody that's unemployed, or we all have a family member that's unemployed. It's a very difficult thing to do, to stand on that Senate floor and say, send the money back. Okay? But, sooner or later in this job, you've got to be able to say, it's the people's money, right? And 99 weeks, is too long to live off your neighbor's dollar. All right? So, as far as unfunded mandates, the problem is all the states, including Missouri, we're all hooked on the heroin, folks. All right? We don't have to do these programs, for the most part. That's why this issue is such an important issue, because this issue is an issue where they said, yes, states, you are going to do it. Okay? You don't have a choice. I mean, if we can opt out of the Medicaid program, okay, but they pay for 60% of it, and we pay for 40%. Now that 40% love, on an $8 billion program, uses up a lot of our revenue that you send down to Jeff City. Okay, so once you get hooked on the 60%, okay, it's pretty tough. This expansion under Obamacare for Medicaid, what we found out in our hearings today, they estimate it's going to add to our Medicaid program. We currently have 900,000 Missourians on Medicaid. 900,000. This expansion under Obamacare will add an estimated 410,000 Missourians. All right? At a cost of over $3 billion. $3 billion. Now, the state, in Obamacare, the feds pick up about 90% of the cost, and the state's 10%. Now, 10% of $3 billion is $300 million. Two things. First of all, we have a $500 million shortfall that we're looking at this next year as a state. And we're going to have to make some tough decisions on the cuts that we're going to make. So we're not going to raise your taxes. All right? So we're going to be cutting spending. All right? The second thing that should concern us all is our federal government's broke. Where are they going to get the 90% to pay for this? Does anybody out there believe that they're actually a year, 2 years, 3 years down the road, they're going to say, oh, we don't have the money. But you've expanded your programs. Here's a new entitlement, right, that everybody's used to, and then what does the court say? The court say, well, the public is, is already used to having this benefit. You can't see that's what got us into trouble with these other social programs that expanded government on a large scale. The point is, this is the right issue for us to be standing the ground, and drawing the line in the sand. This is really the issue. And I can tell you that myself and colleagues in the Senate and those that I saw in this hearing today looking at, should we establish a state exchange? It's a direct, it's a direct piece of Obamacare, okay? I can confidently stand here today and tell you Missouri will not be establishing a state exchange. And I can tell you, even though the House passed